Every week, college football games hinge on a single word.
Touchdown. Touchdown, Texas. Touchdown, Oklahoma. Touchdown. Touchdown. Touchdown, Wisconsin. Touchdown. 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 Touchdown, Stanford. Touchdown. Touchdown, Alabama. Touchdown, Notre Dame. Touchdown. Wow.
This is Touchdown Radio. Here's Gino Torretta and Taylor Zarzour.
Well, it is good to be with you for this final edition of the season of Touchdown Radio Tailgate. From Coral Gables, Florida, I am Taylor Zarzour, and from Coral Gables, Florida, he is Gino Torretta. If you're watching this on YouTube, you would think, well, man, they're in two different places. We are a yard apart right now. My laptop is pointed in a completely different direction than Gino's is, but it is great to be in the same place.
You have less video skills than me with backgrounds and things. I'll add some on your computer for you.
I am from Alabama, and I don't know much about technology, and I'm pretty proud of that. Olivia, that runs the channel, the queen of Channel 84, I told her, I was like, hey, we're going to be in the same place doing the last show, and she said, that's adorable. And so here we are doing the last show.
We're not doing a 40-yard dash like they did before one of those bowl games, okay?
No, we're not. But we get to the end of the season, and I tell you what, Ohio State playing Notre Dame that's a pretty big celebration of college football right there, to get those two names playing against each other in the national championship on Monday in Atlanta.
Well, I think I told people, I said, if this turns out to be that game, that's going to be the priciest ticket, and it is the priciest ticket. I think that, for Ohio State, I think all of us probably thought they were definitely had the best odds to get here. I mean, they started off 1 or 2. They have the, probably the most talented roster in college football. For Notre Dame, we thought maybe outside chance. They're a talented team, but weren't sure with Riley Leonard coming in if they were going to be able to do it. You never know with injuries. They've been able to overcome more injuries than a college football team, I think, this season, and they've made all the right moves. It's worked. You know what I mean? It's probably not the prettiest. Their offense hasn't performed to glaring numbers in the playoffs, but you know what? It's just about scoring one more point than the other team, and they've been able to do that through this playoff run. Do
you think that we could have a bigger matchup for college football than this? Like Michigan played last year, but they played, and no, I don't mean this disrespectfully to Washington. Washington doesn't have a national fan base the way that Michigan or Ohio State or Notre Dame does. Can it get any bigger than Ohio State versus Notre Dame?
I don't think so. I think if you look at teams that move the needle, obviously Notre Dame has the years and years behind them of fandom. They also have the years and years of people that probably are on the other end. There's no I think middle road with either team. You either really like them or probably dislike them. Whether it's justified if they wronged your team or might have made a head scratching, won a national championship against your alma mater that might have been by a questionable call, or any of the history of the two programs. So I think that for college football, I don't know if college football needed this. I think it was the expansion of the playoffs made the regular season matter for a lot more teams, and I think that kept the attention of the college football fan and maybe the casual college football fan through the entire year. We had a defensive player win the Heisman Trophy for only the second time, and I think that this season was as good as any, and I think you have two programs that are as storied, if not more storied, than anybody else in the rest of the country. And I think that that's why it's the hardest ticket in college football. And I hope the game lives up to the hype of the game.
We have a lot to cover on this last program. We're going to go through the season. What a long season, the longest season ever that it's been. It started with the two of us broadcasting in Ireland and it ends in Atlanta with an Irish team playing for the national championship. What is that, 5 months after the season started? So we have a lot to cover throughout the season. We need to talk about what we thought of the 2024 season and this new playoff format, what we like, what we don't like, what we'd like to change for the betterment of the game moving forward. So we're going to get into all of that. And then certainly we'll make a pick on the game. After this show is over with, I get to cash in on my bet, on the season-long bet.
That's why he's here, folks.
Where are we going? Joe's Stone Crab?
We can go to Joe's.
We can go somewhere fun down the street here in Coral Gables.
It's Dryuary, though, so you can have the fun.
It's Dryuary for me, too.
All right. We're halfway. Thumbs up, we're over halfway there.
Yeah, we are. I don't have these moments of clarity that everybody was promising either.
I have more of, God, this would be a nice night to have a good glass of wine.
Every night.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I had a Heineken 0.0 yesterday.
Oh, we can go through the zeros. I've tried the just the haze. It's a good one.
Yeah.
Sam Adams. That's probably my favorite.
Those
so
athletic
far.
drinks too. But anyway, we'll make a pick on the game coming up. Do you think that Ohio State has a significant advantage or just an advantage in talent going into this game?
I think they have an advantage. I think it's significant. I think that if we go to the game of versus Penn State and Notre Dame, I think if Drew Aller plays, I felt bad. He probably played the worst game I've ever seen him play. I think if he played average in that game, I think Penn State still wins the game. And Penn State's talent is good. They are not at the level of Ohio State. I mean, the skill offensive players are all going to start in the National Football League at some point in time. I think that the defensive front on the front seven has been phenomenal all year. And they are as good as advertised. But, that's why they lace them up and start the game, because I think that, we would have never prognosticated, or I would have never, the blowout win against Oregon. I mean, for an Oregon team that went through this season undefeated and had already beaten Ohio State to get manhandled, and I think that goes, and we've talked about it, is just they're college players. And at some point in time, if you lose focus, Saban was, if you listen to the rat poison or whatever you call it, if you lose focus at any point in time, you can get beat. And I think that that has happened with both of these teams. A loss to Northern Illinois, Notre Dame, and Ohio State to Michigan, which was kind of a head-scratcher at the end of the year, especially on a rivalry. How do you lose your kind of the attention span and their attention to detail that the player and the team needs? So I think they've all kind of had their slip-ups, and we see. But going back to the original question, yes, they have a market advantage in talent.
Last week you wondered whether you were going to go to the game or not, the Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami Gardens, and I saw pictures of you at the stadium. Did you stay for the entirety of the game or just some of it?
I went and judged a burger contest.
Oh, okay.
So that was my in. I put on my orange jacket, and I enjoyed the pregame festivities. And
did you go down to the field like I like you to do, or no?
I went down there, but my credential would not allow me on the field, so I was I had to be on the outskirts. So I saw the 35 people on TV and radio that were covering the game on one network. It was like, wow, what I don't understand who's doing what broadcast, but it is what it is. So it was a great environment of, I would say, two teams and two fan bases that were very nice and very respectful to any and all.
Do you think Notre Dame has the better team than Ohio State? Meaning, do you think they play together more than the Buckeyes do?
I think they have to play together more than the Buckeyes do to win and to be where they're at. I think that, part of being the best team is also talent, so I would say no. But they have played better as a group over the course of the season. I think that they've, been able to overcome some injuries that have been absolutely phenomenal. I mean, their star lineman tears a pec. I mean, now all of a sudden he comes back in and plays against Penn State. I mean, that to me is just crazy that we've played that long of a season in college football, and going on their 16th game. I mean, that's too many games in college, but I guess these guys will be prepared for the NFL season now.
14-1 Notre Dame against 13-2 Ohio State, to your point, each playing a 16th game, and neither played in a conference championship game. Of course, Notre Dame's not in one. That's always a topic, and Ohio State didn't get there. So if teams that did play in their conference championship games were in this game, it could be a 17th game. But that is not the case for either one of these teams. Last thing I want to ask you before we take a break. Did Texas's defense provide the blueprint for how you have a chance to beat the Buckeyes last Friday night in the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic in Arlington? They took out Jeremiah Smith. Wasn't a factor in the game.
One catch.
He targeted him a few times, but only one catch. Completely took him out of the game and said, Will Howard and or the backs are going to beat us. It's not going to be the receivers, and it's not going to be Smith. Did Texas provide the blueprint, Gino, and can Notre Dame follow that blueprint?
I think Texas provided a way to hang around with Ohio State. They obviously didn't win, so they didn't provide a blueprint to win. I think that they did what we thought, we thought they would try to do that. Take Jeremiah Smith out of the game. Nobody's been able to do that on the course of the entire season. They held him one catch, and then Egbuka, who was been lights out all year, he was great. And then Tate, I mean, it was like, okay, who's this guy? I mean, how many catches? He probably doubled his catch base. He has 7 catches in the game, and you're like, where did this guy come from? And that's where that we talk about the talent level. There is a difference when you can take the best receiver in college football out of the game and you still have options that the other team can't cover. And I think that that's the talent difference between Ohio State and the rest of college football.
Can't wait for the matchup in Atlanta on Monday night here on Channel 84. Number 7 seed Notre Dame against number 8 seed Ohio State in the national championship game. Back to that contest coming up a little bit later on, but we're going to go through the season, some of the matchups we saw in person, some that we thought were the best in the country, and what needs changing. You always have to talk about that here on the radio, don't you? We'll get to that coming up on Touchdown Radio Tailgate from Miami, Florida on SiriusXM Channel 84. It's Touchdown Radio Tailgate here on SiriusXM Channel 84. He's Gino. I'm Taylor. Fired up to be here in South Florida for the last broadcast of the season. Let's go through the season as we put a bow on the 2024 year. That means I have to flip the notepad all the way to the beginning here.
Do I got to get my boards here out of my?
Yeah. You got a bunch. You got a bunch back there.
Quarterbacks are supposed to have the worst memory. And I have the worst memory. I got to figure out which games I was at.
I was pretty good on preseason predictions for Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, Oregon, Notre Dame, Penn State. Way off on Oklahoma State, Florida State. Those were some bad picks, but most of them were pretty good. We started the year, Florida State losing to Georgia Tech in Dublin. An upset to start the season. And that was probably one of the biggest surprises of the college football season to me, Gino, is what happened to your arch rival, the Florida State Seminoles. There are 17 teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference now. They finished 17th by themselves, dead last, 2-10 on the season.
Wow. Yeah, it's I guess in the transfer portal age, you can quickly become a playoff contender, and as Florida State has shown us, you can quickly go from the penthouse to the outhouse. But they just didn't put together the right roster, And I think we're, dealing with losses not only through graduation but also some young transfers and that. So you can see how quickly it can go south on you. But, I think for the most part, like I said, with Ohio State and Notre Dame here, I think, we thought Ohio State was definitely going to be here. Were they going to get it done? Were they going to stay injury-free to get the championship game? We'd have to see. Notre Dame, we thought, had an outside chance, and they're both here. So I think that it's two of the best teams, and they're here. They've made it through.
So that was week 0. Week 1, Notre Dame was a big story, winning at Texas A&M. Week 2, Notre Dame was the story, losing at home to Northern Illinois. I would say that's the upset of the season in all of college football, and the shocking thing is it didn't cost the Irish. When it happened in week 2, you said, not you, the world said, Notre Dame's done. They're gone. Yet here they are, still in the national championship game.
It was that. You also were like, oh, they're out of it. There's no way. And I'm like, it's 12 teams. You can overcome this. I think the other thing I thought in having done Clemson, Georgia, I was like, wow, Georgia's going to roll. And we saw what they would do and taking a toll on the Georgia defense. And then they didn't get the quarterback production they needed over the course of the season. But I thought Georgia was like, wow, these guys have just reloaded. They're on their way at that point.
Week 3, the only story that I really take home from that week was LSU beating South Carolina and some interesting officiating in Columbia. If that game's officiated a little differently, the Gamecocks could have made the college football playoff. Scrolling through, USC playing Michigan in week 4 in a conference matchup. They're in the same conference now in the Big Ten. That was a lot to get used to. Week 5, Gino, when the game happened, a lot of us thought, wow, those were the two best teams in college football, and maybe we'll see them again in the playoffs. And it didn't happen. Georgia at Alabama, tied, winning 41-34. The atmosphere there was unbelievable. 17-year-old kid, Ryan Williams, and the touchdown catch he made, thought that might be the moment of the season in college football. Turned out it was just the moment of September.
Well, and that's where, it's trying to, can you get these kids up every week? Can you overcome some injuries in key positions? And, Alabama didn't do it, and Georgia didn't do it. And I think that, that's the fine line that you get to a national championship game is, can you overcome those little things? Can you still win without your best? I mean, Tiger Woods was always, hey, this wasn't my A game, but I still won. Mm-hmm. And people thought that was arrogant. But that's the truth. That's what a great team can still win without their best stuff.
Not Alabama. After beating Georgia the next week, they went to Nashville, Tennessee, and lost to the Vanderbilt Commodores. Diego Pavia became a big name in college football this year, and he gets another year of eligibility. A lot of people have a problem with that. Evidently, your JUCO years aren't counting anymore, but he'll be back for Vanderbilt, and he guarantees they're going to have the best team in Vanderbilt history next year. He's already putting a target on his chest. That was the big story from week 6. Let's see, week 7, you saw an unbelievable game. Penn State beat USC in overtime. Nittany Lions end up getting to the semifinals of the college football playoff. They didn't look like they were going to beat the Trojans when you saw them in L.A.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like the tale of two halves, and Penn State woke up at halftime, and they figured out that just throw the ball to Tyler Warren. A little disappointed Penn State didn't start hyping Tyler Warren as a Heisman candidate at that point because he had the best performance that I've seen, offensively all year, and he continued to deliver. He delivered even in the playoff game. But that was a great game and a great venue.
It was a great game. So was LSU. Ole Miss went to overtime, and that was as SEC of an environment as it gets. But neither one of those games were the games of the week that week. It was Oregon and Ohio State that was the game of the week in week 7. Oregon beat the Buckeyes 32-31. Dan Lanning had the rules of college football changed after that with substitution wizardry, if you want to call it that. I thought that was the game of the year in the entire regular season, Gino.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, to have a game hyped like that is usually games of the century don't live up to the hype, but to have it come down to the last play, and then Ohio State would have had a chance, and then Howard, the experienced quarterback, scrambles, and then not enough time to get a timeout, and they ran out of time.
Week 8, the following week, Tennessee beat the Tide again in Knoxville. Second straight time Tennessee's beaten Alabama at home. That was a memorable game, but the one that was the most memorable in the same conference was the nightcap. Georgia whipping Texas in Austin, introducing them to the Southeastern Conference. And at that time you thought, man, the Dogs still might be the team to beat in college football. Didn't materialize, though.
Yeah, it's just consistency. And I think that Georgia showed flashes. I think their best was the best of anybody in college football, but their worst, and not even their worst, when they weren't playing their best for whatever reason, they just it didn't factor in.
We thought in Week 10 that Ohio State-Penn State could be seen again in the national championship, and we came very close to getting it again. Ohio State beating Penn State in State College 20-13. That was a memorable one.
Yeah, that was awesome to be there. Obviously, the both pregame shows, Fox's show, ESPN Game Day was there.
Touchdown Radio.
The Touchdown Radio was there. The best were the T-shirts were noon games suck, I think. So the college kids didn't like it. To get in there was an absolute disaster with the one road in. But the game delivered, and that was the thing where it was just Penn State they didn't get over that hump.
Yeah.
But they still made the playoffs and made a run. And if you go back and a couple plays, they probably would have been in this championship game.
Ole Miss whipped Georgia in Week 11 in Oxford. Kind of crazy to see Kirby Smart's team beat up like they were in Oxford. And I thought at that time Ole Miss might be the team to beat or one of the teams to beat in all of college football. Alabama and Jalen Milroe had the game of his life in Baton Rouge, whipping LSU 42-13. And you thought for sure that Alabama would be part of the college football playoff picture. That didn't happen. The following week, in Week 12, Georgia beat Tennessee in a huge game in the Southeastern Conference. And then the week after that, Alabama basically eliminated themselves from the college football playoff, getting destroyed by Oklahoma 24-3. And another big thing that happened that week is Indiana was undefeated going into Week 13 of the season and lost to the Buckeyes in Columbus. Certainly some games to remember.
Well, and the thing that's interesting there is Alabama losing to Oklahoma. I watched Oklahoma in person at Auburn. Their offense was non-existent, if you will, and really had been non-existent. And for Bama to go on the road and really in that game was the most shocking to me. And kind of a head scratcher, but that's why you play them on Saturdays or Mondays. This upcoming game is anything can happen, and that's where I think that it's kind of shocking that some games turn out like that.
Florida beat Ole Miss in Week 13. Florida would go on to have one of the greatest 8-5 seasons ever, given how difficult their schedule was. And Billy Napier totally turned the way that he's perceived as the head coach in Gainesville, squarely on the hot seat in the middle of the season. And what a great finish to the year he had. The biggest takeaway in the final week in rivalry weekend was Michigan beating Ohio State in Columbus. And when that game was over, I wondered if Ryan Day would still be the coach on Monday. He is still the coach at Ohio State, and he's coaching in the national championship game. How about that?
Well, the rumor in Ohio State at the start of the year was national championship or bust. So,
yeah, they got that?
I'm not sure if he's off the hot seat or not, because the goal was a national championship or bust. So he's to the game at least now.
And then in the conference championships, the biggest takeaways, Clemson beating SMU with an unbelievable 56-yard field goal to win the game from a kid that is Hooser, Nathan Hooser, just from down the street in outside of Charlotte in Cornelius, beating SMU at the gun, and Georgia beating Texas again in the SEC championship game. What a thriller that was.
Yeah, great end of the season. But, I would say as we look to, what we're going to change, I would probably say maybe less conference title games and more teams in the playoff hunt.
Hold that thought, because I want to ask you about that in the next segment. Nolan Hooser, by the way, from Cornelius, North Carolina. There's probably a Nathan out there listening somewhere. Coming up next, that's where I want to go with you. I want to know, what changes do we need to make moving forward? Everybody's excited about how much college football they got this year, about an expanded playoff and what that's done for the sport. But are there some tweaks that we still need to make? I would say absolutely yes, we need to make some tweaks, and we need to make them next year. I'll tell you what they are on Touchdown Radio Tailgate. Gino, we've gone through the regular season. It's time to go through the playoffs, and in just a few minutes, we will break down the national championship game between Ohio State and Notre Dame on Monday. 12-team playoff. We had on-campus games on Friday, December 20th, and Saturday, December 21st. 3 of the 4 games were convincing victories: Notre Dame, Penn State, and Ohio State. Texas Clemson was a little closer than the score would indicate. It was in question late in the fourth quarter. Then you had the quarterfinal matchups that were either on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, or the day after New Year's due to horrible terrorist attack in New Orleans at bowl sites, all 4 of those games. You had the semifinals that were last week, and now the national championship is coming up on Monday, January 20th. There's a lot of momentum for the playoffs. People love having the games on campus, having an expanded playoff. What did you think of it the first year we did it? What would you change?
Well, I love the playoff. I love more teams having a chance to win a national championship. I think, the couple of the changes, I just think, as both of these teams get ready for a 16th game, that is really a long season. You're going into 2 semesters for, they are students at a university. I think if we got rid of the conference title games, I know that's a big ask because the amount of money that probably the SEC and Big Ten make out of theirs. Expand the playoffs to 16. Now, I think it's fairly obvious if you won the Big 12 or any of the Power 4, you're in the playoff. You're going to be in. There's no question. And it doesn't have to be, hey, we have to give those teams an in and an automatic bye, because I thought the worst part about the playoffs was trying to explain to somebody, even if you paid attention to college football, you're like, why is this team ranked here, but they are not? Why are we having different rankings for the actual playoff? In that, I thought the home games were great for college football, but the home games, I think, affected the game. I mean, let's be honest. SMU going to Penn State, it's obviously the weather is a factor. It was the home factor made a huge difference. Do you continue that? Maybe expand to 16, the first rounds at home, and then incorporate more bowl games as the playoff. I don't know. That would be interesting to me if they could incorporate more bowl games, and you would get that home game advantage. But I think that it will affect the games probably even more so. It's why the playoffs. I mean, you look at the NFL, the home team, has a decided advantage. It's
been an exciting season. You referenced early in the show the meaning for all of the games. We're going to get to this in a minute, but I think with what's happened with the NIL is it's balanced the playing field, the transfer portal. The Southeastern Conference isn't dominating the sport, at least at the top, the way it once did.
Well, that's going to change with the House settlement again.
So I want to get to that coming up in just a minute. The playoffs have been so exciting. But I think I have a really good idea, and I'm hesitating to share it because
you're not commissioner yet.
I'm not commissioner yet.
All right.
But I want to know what you think of this.
Okay.
And I want to know what people listening think of this. And if you want to, we do this over on PGA Tour Radio, and we get a lot of response to this. If you want to Instagram me on these thoughts, you can at Zarzour. I would like to do this, Gino. I'd like to have a 16-team college football playoff. I would like to get rid of the conference championship games. And because of how much money those conference championship games generate, I would like to give the SEC, the Big 12, the ACC, and the Big 10 an automatic spot in the round of 16. The 4 champions of those conferences in the regular season, I'd like to give them an automatic spot in the round of 16. And I would like their best team, the SEC, to play in Atlanta when the SEC championship game used to be. Meaning it can still air on the same network it's always aired on. It can still be played in the same place, and it can still generate the same kind of revenue it's always generated, and it'll feature the SEC regular season champion against another one of the best 16 teams.
The 16th, right? If there's one in 16.
Right.
Okay.
If the SEC had the 1 seed, yes, it'd be the 16. The Big Ten would do the same thing in Indianapolis. The ACC would do the same thing in Charlotte. The Big 12 would do the same thing in Arlington.
Any buys involved?
No, it's a 16-team.
Okay.
A 16 team. So and then you could have 4 other games at neutral sites, but those 4 teams would still get.
What about bowl game sites? Maybe incorporate into the. I mean, it'd be a boon for some of the lesser bowl games.
Sure, if you want to consider that, that's fine. But we're talking first Saturday in December.
Okay.
Okay. So that's the round of 16 instead of the conference championship games. The quarterfinals are held the same week that we held the first round this week. The 3rd Friday and the 3rd Saturday in December. Okay?
Okay.
And those 4 games are on campus. Quarterfinal matchups. The semifinals are played in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California, and in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. And the other games can rotate through the other New Year's, traditional New Year's 6 sites can rotate the national championship game. And by the way, if you lose in the round of 16, this is one thing I should have added. If you lose in the round of 16, you can still go to a bowl game. You can go, if you lost on Saturday, December the 7th, you can go, Iowa played Missouri. I called it on the Music City Bowl. That game was a great game, but it didn't really matter. If you lose in the round of 16, you can still go play in a game like that in the Gator Bowl or the Music City Bowl or the Alamo Bowl or one of those level games.
So the last game of the season is still going to be Army-Navy, and that's the only game of the year. And
that's
then the next week you're starting the 16-team playoff.
Nope. The Saturday, December 7th is the round of 16. Army-Navy is December 14th. I'm just using dates from this last year.
Okay.
In the Heisman Trophy. December 21st would have been the quarterfinals on campus. Semifinals would be New Year's Day, and then the national championship will be after that.
So basically you're allowing the conference title games to still happen, but it's not technically a conference title game.
That's exactly right.
Prelim title game.
And
that would also help with would you reseed? Like I think the College World Series
you can
does
do that.
A great thing in how they reseed.
NFL playoffs does that.
Oregon might have been caught a bad deal where they went undefeated and they play the buzzsaw of Ohio State at the start of their first game in the playoffs.
They did get a bad situation there. The NFL does exactly what you're saying. Kansas City and Detroit are playing the worst team left in the divisional round this weekend. So that would be my plan. One of the reasons I want to do that is we had these 4 massive brands just playing the semifinals on Thursday and Friday last week, and the ratings weren't as strong as I thought they'd be. And that makes me think that the season's going on too long, and they're playing on dates that don't traditionally feature college football teams, and people aren't wired to consume college football on those dates. So put the semifinals on New Year's Day, like they've been the last 10 years, and put the national championship game, the Monday closest to that. You give them a week break or whatever, and then have the national championship. But
so with your plan, then the Rose Bowl and the Sugar Bowl would never get a national championship game. The championship game would be rotated between the Cotton Bowl and the Orange, back and forth,
and the Fiesta and the Peach,
Fiesta and the Peach.
Yeah, those 4 that would rotate the national.
And they would still have I guess, arbitrarily a bowl game.
Yeah, if you want to give them that.
Kind of like a few years ago in the BCS, where you'd have the Orange Bowl and then the BCS national championship game.
Yeah, I hadn't gotten that far yet.
Yeah, I think you got to rethink the ending a little bit more. I mean, I think some guys that wear orange jackets would probably be upset with you.
Well, you're going to get the national championship every 4 years,
but you don't get a playoff game. I'm just throwing it out there, and based on that, the Rose Bowl and the Sugar should never get a national championship game.
They don't right now. They only get quarterfinal games right now. They do not get the now. New Orleans could, I guess, also bid on the national championship game, but the Rose Bowl is not involved in the national championship rotation right now.
But okay? So next year the Orange Bowl has the national championship game in Miami, correct?
Does it? Okay. Well, it also has.
Are they going to have the Orange Bowl and a national championship?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
The Peach Bowl just happened. We just had the Peach Bowl. Texas beat Arizona State in the Peach Bowl, and they're having the national championship game also in Atlanta. So I think we can work out those bowl situations that we just discussed, but I think it would make a lot more sense to have the round of 16 the first weekend in December and still allow your regular season conference champions to play in the spots they've always played for an SEC or Big Ten championship game, and then quarterfinals can be on campus. I just think we're going too long.
Let me ask you this. If we expand to 16, do you think it's necessary to have a guaranteed spot for the Power 4 conference winner? I mean, no, I only ask that because I would think that you're probably one of the 16 best teams if you win any one of those Power 4 conferences.
If we're trying to absolutely find the best 16 teams, no. If we're trying to realistically get this done, and now as political as it gets, absolutely there's no way that the Big 12, as an example, or the ACC, let's just say the ACC was the weakest of the power leagues, which I think it was this year. There's no way the ACC is going to say, yeah, sure, we'll make ourselves vulnerable to not getting in the playoffs. They're going to say, you better give us a seat at the table. But I really didn't like the fact that the four highest ranked conference champions got a bye into the quarterfinals. I didn't like that. I don't think it's going to change for next year. It looks like it's going to be 2 years before that changes. But if they got that in the round of 16, it wouldn't bother me as bad. It really bothered me in the quarterfinals.
Yeah, they could just say you got a guaranteed spot, but you're gonna play as you're ranked. So if you're 15th and 12 teams are in, you're gonna be the 12th seed.
One last question I have to ask you: do you think that how things shook out means that there's more balance in college football this year? There's a lot of people out there. I'm getting a lot of message. Hey, Taylor, your beloved SEC. How about that? You're not in the national championship for the second straight year. And listen, I love covering SEC football. I can assure you I haven't lost a minute of sleep about Ohio State playing Notre Dame in the national title. I think that's awesome for college football. So I'm not too upset about it. But I do wonder, I do think the SEC is still the deepest conference in college football, and I don't think it's actually very close. But there's no doubt there are more teams that can get to the playoff and win a national championship at the top of other conferences this year than we've had in the last handful of years. Do you think it stays that way or it changes?
I think that with the NIL and with the ability to transfer portal, now myself, I think they should change that to once a year. You commit to a school for at least an entire academic year.
Amen.
And I think that because of the transfer situation and the NIL, you have different factors that as a coach you're dealing with is maybe the players or certain players aren't as invested in, hey, I'm a Bulldog or I'm a Hurricane or I'm a Trojan or I'm this, for life. And then it's like, oh, there's a bigger check somewhere else. So I think you're having to deal with things that, I mean, let's be honest, people in the NFL, players in the NFL, it's a hard time dealing with trying to get those guys in the same. And it's like, they're professional and they're older. Well, now you have, players that are 18 to 22, now 23, maybe 28, depending on this COVID year and things like that, that are dealing with things that they didn't have to deal with in the past. And I think that's been an adjustment for coaches. I think it's difficult. I think for the transfer portal, you don't have your ability to stockpile weapons, if you will, on your roster. It isn't there anymore because kids are like, you know what? Hey, if I can't start, I mean, it's almost like it seems like if junior college isn't going to count for college, if you're a quarterback,
that's crazy.
Do you go redshirt somewhere or just say, you know what? I'm going to go to a junior college, keep playing, get at least a year playing, and then I'm going to go, get re-recruited for college football. So I think that the investment in the team and that dynamic is a lot harder for coaches today. And I think that that's what we've seen. I think there are players that, hey, if they're not at a certain level, they all right, I'm out, I'm opting out, and things like that. And I think it affects. Is it a judgment against the SEC? No, I just think it's, it is what it is, and we'll see who deals with it best going forward.
I love how much you guys recognize that the SEC is not the national championship game. Clearly, it's in your head. We're going to come back and pick Ohio State and Notre Dame in the national championship next. Gino, how's the game won Monday night between Ohio State and Notre Dame?
Well, I think Ohio State, they just play a clean game. I think don't turn the ball over. Now, that's harder to do. I mean, you got a defense in Notre Dame that's created more turnovers and had more takeaways than anybody. They've had 32 in the college football season, and really the takeaway at the end of the game against Penn State was able to give them the victory. So I think for Ohio State, play clean. And literally, if it's Henderson, Judkins, you go down the list, Egbuka, Smith, Tate, you have weapons. You have any weapons defensively. Their front seven is there. I think for Notre Dame, the exact opposite. They have to defensively create turnovers. Al Golden is going to blitz. He's going to, the thing with his blitz is he has to design some blitzes where maybe they're playing zone behind it. Because if you're going to blitz and face and play any one of those three wideouts in one-on-one coverage, I think that's going to be a recipe for disaster.
You're picking the Buckeyes?
Yes.
Notre Dame plus 8.5 is what I like about this game. Do you agree with that, or do you think Ohio State covers the 8.5?
I wouldn't bet at that, but if you force me, I would take Ohio State less than 10. Yeah.
I just have to say, the start of the season, I had Ohio State winning the national championship, and here they are in the national championship, and I'm picking Notre Dame to beat them. I think Ohio State's the most talented team in all of college football. I think there is something about the chemistry of this Notre Dame team and Riley Leonard as its quarterback and how smart of football that he typically plays and his team around them plays as well, how much pressure the defensive pass rushers are able to get on opposing teams that I just can't look past. Their kicking game they have figured out. It was terrible through the middle of the year. It's now all of a sudden a weapon. I like Notre Dame to beat Ohio State and win their first national championship since 1988. Marcus Freeman has done an amazing job coaching this team, and I think it ends with a national title in Atlanta.
Well, Riley Leonard, I agree. He's been great. MVP of the Orange Bowl was Angeli. I mean, because if Angeli doesn't come in and goes 6
that
or
field
7,
goal.
They get a field goal.
No question.
He didn't. They figured out.
But the whole team has been next man up all year. Gino, it's always fun to do Touchdown Radio Tailgate with you. I'll see you in August.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Are we going to Ireland again?
We might. Who knows? If we might go back over there. Right now we're going to pay off the bet and eat on your credit card. Thanks for listening to Touchdown Radio Tailgate on SiriusXM Channel 84.